Okay, folks, here we are again for English 201. A couple people have to be absent, and I promised I'd record for them. Now, the good news is that Roberto has spent some time updating the blog, and all that you missed last week is now on the blog. Do you remember last time I said at the beginning of hi there, at the beginning of the class, the blog is now up to date. Check it, yeah? And do we remember the number of the blog? We should. Yes or no? No, we don't. Oh, there. Uh, we don't remember the address, the number of the blog. Should I remember it?
You did last time.
Yeah. And we're looking at www.grace.rss.
CT?
It's Grand Cayman
Huh? It's RSS3CT.
GCT. It's Grand Cayman top or tops.com. Is there a dot here?
No.
No, it's all one. Okay, folks, so it's www.grace.rssgct.com. And you enter at Dr. Anderson. At first, we used to enter at careers, but that got a bit confusing to some people. So if you just enter at Dr. Anderson, you will find it opens up and you see things for different courses. And will you find some of the bread and butter handouts, the usual stuff? Things like how to remind us for better essay presentation and project presentation. Also, will our checklist for writing the critical essay be there as well? Yes. Will we also find all kinds of useful oldies but goodies handouts? Yes. And will you find also on a separate site in there, I think it says lecture at the museum or something like that. It's a full-length lecture I did earlier this year at the museum at their request on Mr. Budden's collection of stories. Yes? And so you can, have a listen at leisure. So those of us who had to be absent, Mr. George had told me that some people were going to be absent because they were involved with the conference. Yes? Last week, that's the ACTI conference. Anybody in here was in that group? You. So, yes, so you can actually tell her that last week's lectures are actually there. Okay. And there we are. So today's, and that would apply to you too there. Sorry, I can't remember about that email, but you can get yourself up to date. Now, by now, we should in actual fact have written some of our critiques, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now remember, I told you already at the beginning of the term that I have had this little problem with Dr. Smith and his and my students that we share in common. Because what happens is his papers and mine are often due at the same time. And my beloved students, can we just check this before we go any further? Yes? I need to just say a word to Mr. Brownfield, okay? Here we are. In other words, when his papers are due at the same time with mine, do you know what happens? They say, oh, Dr. Anderson won't mind. I'll hand in hers late. Oh, this happens regularly, yes. So, I warned you at the beginning, I give you lots and lots of notice, yes? And I don't weigh the papers to see how heavy they are. I read them to see what they sound like. Okay, so please, some of us have the critiques ready today, yes? Do we or don't we? Yes or no? Some of us are doing, but we're doing them for Wednesday, most definitely. Absolutely. And then did we set ourselves our last deadline?
No.
No. Shall we do it now? For the big paper? No, but well, we know it's going to have to happen. Oops, sometime, don't we? By the end of November.
No, because when people like us, they don't want stress.
But I mean, we know it has to happen, don't we? And some of us have started moving ahead. Yes. What's the thing about writing? Good writing. It's not a one-shot deal, is it? No. And is this thing that the psychologists call, or whoever, they call it mulling, is that a very important part of the writing process, which we tend to underestimate? In other words, do you have the essay topic in your mind? Or you've read this thing, and then you have to go away and do all sorts of other things. Go off about your business, and, some of us actually cook and iron clothes. Yes? We don't have mama to do that for us. Yes? Okay. We have lots of other things doing. Yes? But at the back of your mind is this Rex Nettleford essay, and you're thinking about the ending of it, and was the ending really, really effective? Was it convincing? This, wonderful, optimistic ending, etc. Is this process that's going on in the backs of our minds all the time called mulling? Is it useful? Absolutely. Because when we come back to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, is it true then that this thing has actually never left our mind? Yes or no? Yeah. And in actual fact, what else is happening at that point? Have some of our ideas on about what we want to write by then crystallized? Yes or no? Of course, of course. So then, is it true that even though we haven't set ourselves a deadline for essay number 2, by now we should be mulling over the topics? Yes or no? Some of you have told me online what you plan to do. Those of us who need these, my friends, these handouts, thank you, Roberto, from last time, come and get them now. We've made some extra copies just for you. Now, this is from a past student, yes, on Mr. Bodden's work. This person was in English 301, where we use it as part of our portfolio of readings too, yes? And as usual, we can critique. Roberto, I forgot the tea in the car. Yeah. Okay, so let us continue then to ask a horrible question. How many of us have put pen to paper or finger to keyboard on the critique, or you said, oh, it's due next week, I'll do Dr. Smith's work first? Yeah. Uh-huh. Surprise! Uh-huh.
The hardest part would be like starting an essay or
Yes, that's the hardest part. Is the thesis paragraph the hardest part?
Yes.
Did we say that in the beginning? For the obvious reason, lady in pink, you are saying?
I feel like mine can be short because
Yeah, sorry?
feminine critical, and this is a short essay. I feel like it's gonna be inadequate.
Are shorter pieces of writing actually more compressed with a lot more inferential reading involved? Yeah. In other words, in English 102, when we were doing critiques, I used to say to my students, do not be intimidated by, well, we shouldn't be intimidated by anything we read, should we? No. But nonetheless, if we're going to be intimidated by something we read, do not be intimidated by length. Why? The longer the passage is the more repetition is in it. Yes. Oh, sorry. Isn't that the truth? Yes. The shorter passages are more compressed, and they actually have more inferences in them, between the lines, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yes. The hardest one to do, my friend, is in fact the feminine principle. Mm-hmm. Okay. Shorter pieces are more dynamic. Yes. They involve more inferential reading, reading between the lines, so to speak, yes. But a well-written shorter piece is often very dynamic for the precise reason that the shorter pieces often contain more thesis statements per paragraph. Mm-hmm. In other words, you'll find a shorter essay that has maybe 5 paragraphs will have 3 thesis statements in it. Yes? Okay. Does your reader have to agree with your point of view? No. No. It's nice if your reader agrees, but in actual fact, what if we don't agree? Sorry, Lord. Thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah, this has been a bad morning. Yeah? 3 o'clock. Thank you. Yeah. Graduation was last night. I was just too excited to fall asleep. It was lovely. How many of us came? It was on TV? Oh no. You got your finger in the door?
It was more of a support.
Oh, okay. It's possible to break fingers like that, It was on TV, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So we continue, yes? Are the graduations milestones for the college and for Cayman? Yes or no? When I came here in 99, I was told that the college was the place where people would go if they couldn't get into college abroad. Yeah, did a lot of Caymanians have this attitude towards the college? That they didn't want to go here, and if their parents put them here, they were very upset. Yes? And so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Have we come a long way? Do we have graduates now who go abroad to school who come back and tell us, well, here at the college they got far more individualized attention? Yes? That lecturers actually were more accessible? And so on. Mm-hmm. So small can be big, if you know what I mean. We're told it's a small college numerically speaking, yeah? I mean, they have colleges, universities. How many students are at the University of Toronto regularly? It's in the thousands, yes?
One of the, I think the University of Vancouver is like a whole city in itself.
Sorry?
Yeah.
One school in BC is like a whole
What's the name?
city.
UBC, yeah. University of British Columbia. Yeah. It occupies a whole city.
Like
It's a city on its own.
Really?
University of Waterloo is also really big.
And it's big. Yeah. What happens to students sometimes? It's how many?
Waterloo, I think last time was somewhere near 7,000.
Whoops. So are we looking at situations when classes have hundreds in them? Yeah. When I was teaching at UWI in Jamaica, say for instance, did your first year group regularly have 150, 200 students? Oh. And then say electives like American literature, African American literature, which people took, if it was a major course, if they were doing a special English degree, or if they were doing social sciences, they often took the African American literature, where you're looking at 200 people, etc. Okay, this can be scary. Uh-huh.
And maybe worse, you have to book an appointment with your teacher.
You have to book appointments with
the lineup can be like weeks.
This was where?
In Ontario.
That's University of Ontario?
No, it was just a small college, never mind a university.
A small college? That was small. What college was that?
It was called Mohawk College.
Okay. Whereas now,
The University of Waterloo is also considered pretty small.
and that's the one that occupies the whole city.
No.
No, that's the one with
7,000. Yeah. Whereas now, teachers make appointments with students who do not turn up. Teachers send emails to students who consistently miss classes. Yes, yes, and so on and so forth. Teachers wait in their offices for people to come and keep appointments. Yes, this happens. Okay, uh, so there we are, folks. We've come a long way. And our friend here, Tomian, did just a beautiful performance. Yes? And can she ever sing? Okay, so let's come back to today then. I mean, we don't have to keep saying it, but you people realize you're part of a big foundation stone period in Cayman's history. You realize that this college means a lot. Yes or no? Does it mean a lot in Caribbean history as well? Of course. In other words, the ACTI conference the other day was what? The Association of Advanced of what it is, Caribbean Tertiary Institutions. Yes? And anybody who went or read up anything on it, you will notice how many different colleges there are throughout the Caribbean that basically are on the same pathway we are on. Yes? Now, it is very, very important, in other words, as a kind of foundation stone for education and training in these societies. Of course. Of course. In other words, do many of us come from families in which we are the first people who have ever been to college or university? Yes. I certainly came from such a family. And my father let us know that you could stand on your head, you could do somersaults, you could kill yourself, but you could not drop out of school and you could not miss going to university. Sorry? Yeah? You could do handstands, cartwheels, you could do anything you want, commit suicide if you want, but you could not drop out of university. I am just joking. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But you get the message. Mm-hmm. You could do the impossible, in other words, and the undoable, but you're not dropping out of university. Is that because parents of that generation hadn't had the opportunities to go to university at home in their own islands? Yes? And they were locked into earning a living, not just for themselves, but for younger brothers and sisters quite often. Isn't this true? Yes. So is this why at graduation now we meet all these parents who are just so happy? Is it that they're happy just that their children are graduating? Excuse me. Or is no, it's not that. Some of these kids are on scholarships. But is it that they feel the child is achieving something for everybody? It's like they're reliving their own lives through the children. Isn't that true? Yes? Mm-hmm. Is that why then your lecturers get very upset when people keep missing classes, especially people who are being paid for by the government or parents who are actually working to earn this money, to write these checks for the college? Is that why your lecturers get very cranky with such people? Yes or no? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we send them to come to counseling to get their priorities in order. But do they go? No. And we send emails to them and to the counselor, and we get the counselor gets anxious too, but nothing happens. In other words, do we sometimes undervalue opportunities that are available on our doorstep? Yeah. And when we throw away such opportunities the first go round, should we complain when we lose them later? No. No. Okay, my friends. So there we are. Now today, how many of us have in actual fact done something towards our thesis statements for our critiques? Thank you. Does anybody want to read yours and we can respond to it quickly?
It's on the computer.
It's on the... laptop, computer, iPad, magic phone,
We
etc.
want to show you personally.
Yeah.
Well, you can email me.
Yeah.
Because remember there are no office hours today. After this, we get some lunch and then there's this class from 4 to 6. Okay, can we continue? For instance, must we start out by paragraph 2, giving a clear message to our reader as to what our view is of this thing we are critiquing? If we don't do that in a thesis paragraph by paragraph 2, will we lose our reader by paragraph 4? Yes. Yes. Will we also lose control of the focus of it by paragraph 4? You bet. Okay. Can we start out saying something like, in this ironic, argumentative, and expository essay about child-rearing methods in the Caribbean, the writer, Professor Rex Nettleford, offers a series of provocative views. Full stop. Have we, in our opening sentence, said a mouthful right there? Yes. You could say, for instance, Nettleford analyzes what he sees as dualistic and troublesome child-rearing methods of the typical Caribbean mother figures, and shows the dangerous freedom given to young men as a result of this dualism. Yes? However, are we telling some of the content right away? However, I feel that this essay does not confront fully the ethical implications of this dualism and its moral and ethical impacts on Caribbean societies. Have we given the reader an encapsulation of exactly what our view is and our reaction is to this essay? Yes or no? The part that says, however, I do not feel that Nettleford confronts sufficiently on an ethical level the ethical implications and moral implications of this dualism for Caribbean societies. Full stop. Yes, dear.
For the feminine principle, can I critique that it's not aggressive enough?
Can you for the what?
For the feminine principle.
Do you feel it's not aggressive enough? You think her tone is too mild and soothing and gentle? Do you feel that in order to really nail readers, she needed to be more aggressive, perhaps more detailed?
Yeah.
Do you think she needed more supporting details? Maybe more examples and illustrations? Say that. Which brings us to another question there. What's your name again? Christian. Is it that some topics just demand more length?
Yeah, I think it's too short for that topic, so.
Yeah.
Say that. Say that. Is there that interesting irony that some topics actually just demand a more lengthy and detailed treatment? Yes? On the other hand, was it an editorial written for a magazine that may have given her a specific word length? So it's a topic which is very provocative and which is, of course, what? Has very deep emotional and psychological implications about male and female behaviors and values. And as such, Christian, you feel that it demanded more time and more development, perhaps through more supporting details. Is this a valid thing to say? Yes. Okay. Did we make the point about Mr. Bodden's zone that could we start out by saying in this thought-provoking and very thoughtful essay, yes? Or in this stimulating and thought-provoking essay, Bodden attempts to what? Deal with a major problem. It is not the only major issue. A major issue of Caymanian society, namely what he sees as growing separation between born and bred Caymanians and the expatriate community. Yes? Whether or not you agree with this essay and his views, namely, has he encapsulated his views in that interesting and ironic metaphor, even sarcastic metaphor or analogy, instead of lighting a candle, they quite typically curse the darkness. Yes? And he's saying this about both sides of this debate. Okay? Whether or not we agree with Bodden's view, could we say early, I would say in my opening thesis paragraph, that whether or not readers accept Bodden's view of this dualistic situation, I personally feel that it took great courage from him as a writer to even attempt to deal with this topic on which feelings run so deeply. In other words, are there times when it actually does take guts, courage from a writer to try to address a complicated issue, an emotionally charged issue? Yes or no? Yes. Now, remember that can we also say that this is part of his preface to the Cayman Islands in Transition, in which he deals with many of these issues in greater detail. Yes? And as such, readers should not expect that all the aspects of the Cayman, non-Caymanian debate will be included. But I feel that he has some powerful thesis paragraphs in which he spotlights some of the major moral, emotional, and other aspects of this debate. These thesis paragraphs come appropriately early in the essay, in paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. And Bodden attempts to find moral solutions to social and economic problems that actually have moral implications for the society.
But like if we don't agree, can we still put our opinion?
Of course, yes. Then, in other words, is this what he's trying to do? Yes or no? Some readers may say that a moral solution is impossibly idealistic and that Bodden is being impractical. Yes? Some readers may even object and say that though Bodden feels that part of the solution is for the non-Caymanians to treat Cayman as their own, as if it were their own hometown. Yes? The truth is that unless people have legal rights, as in legal documents to live in a country, they will feel insecure. Yes? Or if there are stereotypes about them in that country, they will feel insecure. Yeah? In other words, that's one of the objections that some people raise, that in that sense then, to some readers, Bodden may be being impractical or unrealistic. On the other hand, Bodden also presents his view that native Caymanians must abandon their own stereotypes, about foreigners and stop denigrating them, as he puts it. Yes? On the whole, however, Bodden attempts to create a two-sided analysis of a very complex issue in ways that attempt to avoid stereotyping and bias of all kinds. And this has taken immense courage and patience from him as a writer. How does that sound? In other words, do we have to give credit where credit is due, even when we don't necessarily agree with or accept all the views that a writer has put out? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? There's this interesting point. If we can get a date attached to the publication of something that was written, does it help?
Yes.
When the thing was written, what was happening at that time. Now, when Bodden wrote this in, was it 2007, had the debate about expatriate Caymanians and established Caymanians and expatriates reached the level of urgency and even animosity that it is at today? Had the rollover been put in place yet? I think it's 2007. The rollover was just in place then. Uh-huh. But given, could we say something like, historically speaking, given the impacts of the rollover, not just on the lives of expatriates, but on the lives of small businesses run by Caymanians and housing rented by Caymanians to foreigners, yeah? Given the fact that those impacts had not been yet clearly felt, is there something quite prophetic or intuitive about Bodden's view that encourages people to actually learn to live together and cooperate with each other and see Caymanian as their own? Put it this way, remember we were getting a bit, my friend in the front row, you were saying that there are prejudices against foreigners. And I said, yeah, if I would be hypocritical if I didn't admit that. But would I also be hypocritical if I didn't admit that I've seen foreigners behaving in ways here that are actually forms of prejudices against Caymanians? Or they're forms of prejudices, if not against individual Caymanians, against Cayman. Full stop. Yes or no? Yeah. So I have to agree with Mr. Bodden. If I didn't admit that, I'd be being hypocritical. Are you listening to me? Yes? You're saying what?
I'm telling them what you said.
Yes, but while you're doing that, are you missing what I'm saying? Is it better for her to just ask me to repeat the whole thing? I'm sure there must be a way to repeat this, but I don't know how to do it. Okay. It's not a real tape recorder where you can press rewind, is it? Okay. Where were we? Is it true that on the one hand, Bodden is right? And in all honesty, no matter where you are sitting in this society, if you're going to avoid hypocrisy, you are going to have to admit that he's right. There are prejudices on both sides of this debate. Yes? I've even thought about it some more, and judging from what some of my students say to me, do we, you know this expression, by our pupils we are taught? That teachers learn a lot from students? Yes. Okay. Is it true that, okay, one of the analyses I've come to is this, that in the higher earning areas of the workplace, Caymanians come upon a lot of stereotyping of Caymanians by other Caymanians and by expatriates who own these businesses.
Yeah.
Let me repeat that. Sarah, are you with us? Yeah. In the higher earning areas, the higher pay, the high end areas of the workplace, Caymanians come upon a lot of prejudices and stereotypes, and open prejudices and stereotypes about Caymanians by the expatriates who run these businesses or even own them, or by other Caymanians who actually disrespect Caymanians. Yes?
But that don't make no sense, especially when you go higher up because you took time to go to school, so obviously.
Money talks. Are we, you're saying it doesn't make sense, but let me ask you this question, my friend. If the rewards are higher, financial and other rewards, is the competition greater? And will the barriers to achieving the rewards be higher, be bigger? And are stereotypes and prejudices forms of barriers against all people's achievements? Of course.
But
Yeah.
honestly, because majority of the complaint that you hear against Caymanians is that they're lazy or they don't show up to work. But the fact is, you went to college or university to get that position. Because when you're talking about the higher areas, you went to school, so obviously you put in work. So you should not be, I guess, judged at the same level as someone who just work in that box. No offense to anyone.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that when the rewards are higher, even though people may have put in more work to be part of this competition, yes? Because the rewards are higher, will the barriers also be bigger? Does this make sense? No, but is it a sensible analysis? Of course it doesn't make sense. It's unfair. But it's irrational even. It's irrational because it throws talent out the window. Yes? And it undervalues training and contributions that people can put in. Yes. Let's face it, when employers have these kinds of stereotypes in place and bosses enforce these stereotypes, are they cutting their own throats? Of course, but people do this regularly. Yes? Is it also true that, say, for instance, some research that a former student of mine in the HR master's program a few years did, some research has proven very clearly that, how was it this lady put it, that in actual fact, we hear a lot about conflicts between expatriates and Caymanians in the workplace, but what we do not hear enough about and what we sweep under the carpet are the conflicts between Caymanians and Caymanians in the workplace. Okay? In other words, the mistreatment and the stereotyping of Caymanians by other Caymanians in the workplace is a reality. Yes? On the other hand, if we continue what I was saying, is it also true that in the lower paying areas of the workplace is where we see the stereotypes and abuse of foreigners more visibly in place? Yes or no? One of the reasons is, of course, that there are fewer Caymanians working in those lower paying areas of the workplace, because as some Caymanians have told me, it doesn't make sense doing that job, Paula. What it costs to get to work and so on isn't worth what it's paying me, even just transportation costs. Yeah? And then, of course, do you have the people who know that because they're Caymanians, they can get money from social services? So does the rewards factor come into this debate as well? What people are actually being paid? Yes? But does Budden attempt, these are practical realities in the debate, but does Budden attempt to put things in a wider psychological and moral perspective? Yes or no? It's an attempt that some people, one writer of one critique I read says, this is impractical, it's too idealistic. But is it also true that in actual fact, we have to demand the best of people? Or else we might end up having to accept the worst from them. Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. So I would say that at the time, 2007, when he wrote this, there was something quite insightful about not just courageous, but insightful about his attempt to actually address the issue. Mm-hmm. Okay, some of us may feel that he generalizes too much, some not. Yes? Okay. Can we continue then? Mm-hmm. To come then to the stories. Are we looking at a collection in a gathering of old men in which we're going to see a number of important structural elements that we've met before? Yes or no? Yes, of course. I just hate standing here talking to myself.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay. Where's my book? Oh.
Miss Anderson, you never did,
Sorry?
you never did get to the point where we settled on our SAD, sorry.
No, we said we act like we had it. Does it have to be somewhere around the last week of November? Yes or no? Yeah. Does it have to be somewhere there? Yes. Will we open the door, please? Where is this book? I took it out in the car. Okay. Shall we look at then, as usual, the structures? Yes? Now, have we by now, you have a calendar? You want to put a date on it? Uh-huh. When is the 2nd of December? When do exams begin? The 9th. What day is the 9th? A Monday? Yeah. Can you? The 2nd would be a Monday, yes. So what's the 27th of November? The Wednesday. We meet on the Wednesday. Let's call it the Wednesday that we want the big papers. Have I been hearing? Sorry, dear?
They can't say Friday?
No.
We might not meet on Friday. The 22nd to the 29th. Yes? Is that when our papers must be in? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Some of us have already done the worst part, which is what? We've already attempted to write a thesis paragraph. Yes? Okay. Do we also need to think of, remember, some of you have been sending me topics of your own, Yes? In other words, just because you haven't gotten the thing all worked out nicely in your head, does that mean that you can't send me something? Of course not. Okay. Can we continue? If we're looking at our major umbrella areas as usual, if you're looking at the major umbrella areas of the work, what are we looking at? Form or structure and content or themes. Do we in fact see a lot of familiar structures in the work? Yes or no? Remember, we wish to do a far more mature analysis of the book than just a thematic reading. Yes? What's the book about? It's about how Cayman used to be. It's about people in Cayman who lost their lives to the ocean. It's about people in Cayman who lost their houses to predators. It's about everyday lives of everyday people in Cayman. Basically, that's it. Yes? Okay. But what are the structures? The hows, the method. Okay. Yes. Here we are, folks. What are these? Are we looking at the biggie, of course, voice? If we go back to Naipaul, yes? You are saying the same thing.
No, something else.
Sorry?
It was something else.
Voice. Now, which story is voice? Even if you haven't read it, if you were listening last time, we mentioned this, didn't we? In which story does voice become very important? The dialogue, the conversations of the old men. I think I left my book in the car. Can I just borrow someone else's, please? Yes or no? I know I picked it up. Yeah, please. I can, thank you, Mark. Okay. If we're looking at structure, is the one that is most structurally complex or challenging, of course, the one in which voice is important. Why is that? Because voice in and of itself is a structure that lends a great deal of what? Texture, variety, as well as what else? Perspective, yes? In terms of values analysis, yes? In terms of reader engagement to our work. Remember that the voice of the boy narrator in Naipaul's story has been of crucial importance. Why? Because of course what? We thought it wasn't a static voice, was it? It was, as some of you told me in the exam, it was a voice that kept moving and changing as he moved and changed from childhood to the outskirts, the threshold of manhood. Yes? Okay. So voice then, along with tone, can do what? It can give us a clear insight into how human life changes. Isn't that the truth? If all literature is about human life, is human life something changing? Of course. Yes. And does voice, when it's used best, reflect those changes? But does voice also immediately take us, so we're looking at tone, yes? And are we looking at perspective, or what some critics call point of view? But through voice also do we get the important level of values analysis, without which mature literature would not be mature literature. Would you agree with that? Now, if you haven't read this story yet, The Gathering of the Old Men, did I say to you last time that was the one to read? Yes. Okay. And what was it that we noticed there? First, on page 130, what was happening? We had an introduction from a third person, all-seeing narrator who tells us what was happening. There was this gathering of old men at the guardhouse, yes, in Bodden Town, circa 1953. This voice tells us on page 130, Josh, if you can just share with somebody for me, please. The old men had been gathering at this place for a long time, but my earliest recollection came, are we getting that interesting combination that we see in a lot of historically based folk stories of the first person narrator who says I, but also the wide-ranging observation that we associate with who? A third person, all-seeing narrator. Now, does that combination of elements, the intimacy of a first-person narrative voice with the comprehensiveness of a third-person narrative voice, is that a combination that we've seen in the folk story tradition, also in, say, Glinton's story, The Golden Wife? Yes or no? Yes or no? Have we talked about this before as typical aspects of the folk story? Let's go back in time. Who can remember some of the typical aspects of the folk story? Excuse me. It conveys morals,
Values.
morals and values. Excuse me. It's passed down by word of mouth within the culture. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
It has like magic and voodoo in it normally, especially.
Some folk stories, there's a belief in superstition, magic, voodoo, etc. Did we notice that one in the card cutter? This lady is having problems in her marriage. She doesn't go to a marriage counselor. She goes to somebody to read her cards. Yes, who is supposed to be able to analyze the situation and tell her the future by reading the cards. Yeah? What else? They often, a lot of folk stories often identify or define classic versions of the hero. Do folk stories also give us the concept of life as a circle? Yes, that there is an analysis of karmic aspects in life. Sorry? The battle between good and evil, and in the traditional folk story, good wins. Yes? Then do we also get an analysis of what is called karma in life? And it often tells us what? That what goes around will come around again, and that we will reap what we have sown. Okay, now of course this is an interesting thought when we are looking at a story or a tradition of stories based in where? A small environment. In other words, it's not that this person can do something terrible over here in New York and then go off to California on the other side of America or, Hawaii or wherever, Puerto Rico, and still be in America, but never meet the people that they did this terrible thing to again. In other words, they can redefine themselves, yes? Represent themselves, recreate themselves, as Hollywood puts it, yes. In a small island, you can't do this. You will meet again the people that you've done terrible things to. So you should be careful what you do to others. A fact that the so-called beautiful young man in Glinton's story didn't think about at all. Isn't that the truth? Yes. So then, what else do we notice? That this concept of life as a cycle, an endless circle, is, of course, central to the folk story tradition in which Bodden's work can be placed. But is there another framework in which we place this collection as well? Of course. Are we looking at the framework of the historical story? You've heard about historical novels. Last time we spoke about Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities, yes? Which didn't just use a historical background, roughly speaking. You've read some of Danielle Steele's books?
No.
No? You never heard of Danielle Steele?
I have not heard of a huge fan of her.
Ah, she has a huge fan. Oh, amazing.
She has a ton of her books, and I'm like, can we get rid of them now?
You have them? Bring them to the library. Bring them. Give them to the library.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Okay. What is it that at her best, not at her worst, at her best, Danielle Steele was good at doing? Using a historical background in which to place her characters. Does Danielle Steele, of course, have a recipe that she uses if you think about it long enough? Yes? Danielle Steele's characters, female characters, are always beautiful, but they do not live by their beauty. They're intelligent women who do not depend on their looks or their sex appeal in order to do well. Isn't that one of the aspects of the recipe? Yes or no? If you haven't read it, it's interesting. Anyway, I won't go any further. Okay, what is it that writers like Danielle Steele, Steele, if you haven't heard of her, you must look her up on the internet. She's one of the most published living female writers, yes, or writers, full stop. This woman is a self-made, I think she must be a billionaire by now, yes? Mm-hmm. And she says that she really doesn't like, in one interview I read with her, she said she doesn't bother with laptops and computers. She has an old typewriter and she just types on that. Yes.
Did you believe that?
Sorry?
You believe that?
Yes.
An old typewriter. I type on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Typewriters are cool.
Yeah, I had an IBM Selectric for a long time. An electric typewriter, which I love.
You still have it?
I don't know what happened to it in the moving up and down. I thought, you know what, we all dread losing something that we've been working on. But apparently she's a very glamorous woman and has all the diamonds and emeralds you could imagine. But apparently she said in that interview she sits down in her nightgown or her pajamas and just types. Mm-hmm. Okay. We know that writing comes more easily, Sarah. Are you with us? What are you saying? What were we saying?
We were saying that that'd be an awesome thing. You just sit down and like go and sit there and type out essays.
Excuse me. Excuse me. It actually can work. Do all of us have...
I would be sad.
Sorry?
I feel like because Erin said I was being sarcastic, so I'm not being sarcastic. I really do that. Yeah, she had a typewriter.
Do we all have some style of producing whatever we produce, yeah? Some of us write bits and pieces of the essay on bits and pieces of paper.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes? Mm-hmm. And then put these bits and pieces of paper in safe places.
It helps to write some of it out on paper. And
Yeah. And if you don't put it, but be careful about the safe place where you put it. You might find it again. You might have to rewrite it. But generally speaking, does writing challenge us to actually create our own comfort zone for writing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It does. Some of us find that if we talk the thing into a tape recorder, when the ideas are fresh in our minds, just talk into the tape recorder, then go back and listen to it on the tape recorder later. Then you can go back and start writing. It really helps. This is how I do it. Okay. So generally speaking, I don't know how we got into that, but is it true that, some writers can use a historical moment? Yes? In other words, was it Danielle Steele or this other woman, I can't remember her name, who wrote this fascinating novel set against the fascist period when Hitler was ruling Germany. Yes? And the heroine came from, I think, a privileged, must have been German family, who had fallen in love with a Jewish man. I don't know. Something like that. In other words, can writers use historical moments in order to capture imagination, among other things. Yes?
I was gonna say, very much like Mr. Nightfall, because I read the other book, Stories My Grandfather
Never told me, yeah.
I think he's very detailed in how he writes, which leaves you room to think and imagine how it would actually be.
Yes.
And when he goes back in time and he tells you like what the woman was wearing, stuff she would do, and
Yes.
you could like visualize.
Do the details, for instance, in the death of Miss Artemitra Johnson. She uses such and such a powder and such a cologne when she's going to bed. She's going to bed knowing she's going to die soon, and in a sense she's preparing to meet her husband in the next life. But the details are very specific. You are quite right. Why is it that some writers then will capture a historical moment for us, a very specific time and place, historically speaking, even while they are creating universally realistic human characters?
That was a true story, right?
Yes, of course.
So he knew her.
Yes. If you talk to older Caymanians, they'll tell you it happened. Okay. They'll even tell you the direction of her house. That her house was actually at some easy stop-off point when people were traveling from one end of the island to the other. Yeah. And that apparently she would give people water and so on. People were hot and tired. Yeah. Okay. So the use of then history by in a work that is historically based, what does it do for us? It of course captures the moment in time. It of course captures that moment in the history and the culture of a country. Yes? But does it also flesh out for us, as we said last time, and give a human face, FACE, to, the dates and the incidents, the happenings that are, the stuff of history. So in that sense, then, does the writer who uses historical backgrounds and information not only give us a dramatic story, and we all love to be read stories, don't we? Yes, it engages our imagination. But at the same time, what does this writer also do? It makes real the thing we call history. Okay. Now you're saying, my friend Erin, that thank you. If you read the other collection that came before this one, Stories My Grandfather Never Told Me, there is that same combination of history, historical reality, and characters who are imaginatively appealing, yes? Who are quite realistic versions of human nature, and therefore who have a certain human universality to them. Remember what the French called the verisimilitude, the true-to-lifeness. Yes. Okay. So then, first, for a writer to hold and keep our attention, if he's using history, because remember some of us hate history, and we say too many dates and figures, very similitude, yes? The true-to-lifeness factor, the authenticity. Does the writer have to combine the historical realities with that quality of verisimilitude, human authenticity, human universality in how he shapes his characters? Yes, of course. Then, of course, we're also aware that other structural ingredients, in other words, it's not just the verisimilitude in the shaping of the characters or the actual authenticity in terms of the historical ingredients. There is also the classic element of voice, through which the writer can use tone, establish perspective and point of view, and of course give us an all-important element of values analysis that mature literature will offer us. Yes or no? Of course. Okay, now if we look at page 130, we'll notice the introduction to the stories is voiced for us with the element of the all-seeing, fly-on-the-wall, comprehensive third-person narrator who knows all of this stuff that he's talking to us about, but also the personal quality of it. I. Remember that the storyteller who says I is the one who captures our imagination fastest. Yes? Of course. Those Clinton stories do her stories have that quality that suggests to us, and my grandmother told me this, she was there, she lived on this island. Yes. Okay. The old men had been gathering at this place for a long time, but my earliest recollection came when I was a mere youth of about 7 or 8 years of age. Their numbers during these evening conclaves varied, but at no time were there less than 4. Now, Mr. Budden, I'm asking him to come to talk to us when we've, finished reading this, because I don't want him to come to talk to us, and then when he asks for reactions and questions, we just sit there in silence, yes? Embarrassing. In other words, if we read the books, then of course we have more to say. Yeah? Okay. And we won't have him standing there feeling he's talking to himself like what we do to our lecturer. Yes. Okay. And does the concept of the griot, Griot, of course, hark back to older traditional societies in which there was this respect for older people, the elders. Yes, we found this. You find this in Japanese culture. You find it in a lot of Arab cultures. You find it in a lot of African cultures, where the older people, and of course Greek culture, the older people were seen as what? Walking, breathing versions of your past, your roots, your identity, your history. Yes? Mm-hmm. Remember when Virgil tells us in the Aeneid, yes, the story of the destruction of Troy, yes? Is it the Greeks who destroyed Troy or the Trojans who destroyed Greeks? The Greeks destroyed Troy. But what is it that the Aeneid tells us, Aeneid, or the Odyssey, same thing, that Aeneas is led out of the burning city of Troy carrying Anchises, his grandfather, on his back. Why? The old man is quite frail, yes, and Aeneas is a very strong warrior. What is it? He's called Ulysses in the other version of this same story. Why his grandfather? Because the grandfather represents who? His past, his youth, his roots, his identity. Exactly. Okay, now that concept of respecting the old is of course part of what? This older tradition that Budden is trying to evoke and recreate in this story, and are some of the major themes and concerns voiced by the old men, also some of the major themes of the entire collection. Is that why, of course, this conversation at the gathering at the guardhouse, yes, actually suitably comes at the end of the book. In a sense, is he wrapping up many of the major themes of the book? My dear friends, we must get these things read this weekend. They are easy reading, I've told you that. They have a familiarity about them that makes them very easy to read. Yes? Okay. Sorry? And pretty, yes. Yeah. A time is coming in this place, page 131, when you'll wake up and find a man dead beside the road and you won't know who killed him. I remember them prophesying as they warned against what would happen when the eight bloods mixed with Caymanians. Say what? You heard what I said. Don't you see what's happening? Every crab from the bush is winding up here, page 131. Too many foreigners, too much flotsam. Every jackman and his master washing up on Caymanian shore. Flotsam, I say, washing up on shore like driftwood. First John Bolton, the limey who come to a tropical island in a pair of woolen trousers with the intention of taking over, gaining control. Next panheads and Boer Spaniards, and always mosquitoes. Okay. Are we looking at I don't know. I think, I don't know. You can ask Mr. Budden when he comes. Okay.
You mean like Pan-American, like those people?
Is it someone?
People who,
Does it mean like mapping here? Like,
no, I think it's more like people who, I don't know if it's like people who walk very straight because they're accustomed to carrying things on their heads.
like a Jamaican? I think it's
African?
I don't want to be like, I don't.
African?
I think so, yeah.
Maybe. I mean, you've seen pictures of women who are supposedly in some place in Africa walking with things on their heads and walking totally straight. Yes?
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's mixed with African and Jamaican.
Maybe, yeah. In that Jamaican women from rural areas who grew up in rural areas are known for this erect carriage. Remember, are you listening? You remember in Lorna Goodison's story about her mother that she walked with that old-time straight-backed carriage. Yes? Okay, that's what you believe. Can't you see that we will be outnumbered in 10 years' time? Light up the smoke pan, page 132, the top. What's a smoke pan? I think it is a pan of green bushes that you would light to get rid of the mosquitoes. Okay, now if you read any of the Cayman history texts, yes, there was one by a man called Williams called History of the Cayman Islands. It had been in actual fact funded, I think, by an early government. You will find it in the library downtown. It's a little green book, very manageable size. He talks about, well, you don't want to be too brief, but you know what I mean. He talks about the mosquito problem that traditionally happened in Cayman, and we still fight it today, don't we? Yes. And how the cows would die of suffocation because the mosquitoes would get into their nostrils. Ouch. And then, of course, have we also read Founded Upon the Ocean? The Seas? Yes. Founded Upon the Seas. This was by what? What's his name again? Crichton. Yes. Okay. So those are some of the background readings, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Now, are we looking at a major theme that we just looked at in his introduction, that introductory essay, which was one of our choices, namely diversification of the society through migration and this concept of what he called the us versus them dichotomy. Yes? In other words, the anxiety that many Caymanians had and still have that they'll be outnumbered in their own society. Yes? On the other hand, is there that very realistic point, which, of course, Budden makes elsewhere, and which Dr. Frank McField suggests also in his book, his big play, Time Longer Than Rope, that if a society is small enough, yes, if a society is small enough, you need immigrants from elsewhere, or you might end up marrying some cousin of yours. That there is this thing called inbreeding, which breeds what? Genetic problems. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, did that used to happen also in Cayman? Yes or no? Inbreeding. And in other words, that you actually, it still does, is the idea that you need, are you listening, my friends? Let's nail this thing quickly. Yes? Do you need people from outside? Yeah. Then there's the boredom factor. If everybody is sorry, you need to what?
Some of us need to leave here as well.
There is that too. But can it get very boring if all the people you meet are people you've met before?
Yes.
And if all the people you meet are not, this is an essay, they're not only people you have met before, good grief, they might be your cousins. Hi, how are you? Thank you very much. See you next week. Okay. My essays are coming in, the late one. We had a choice of either Wednesday or Friday since we don't meet on Monday, these people. Okay, so there's the boredom factor we don't want to have to deal with. There, the monotony factor. You keep meeting these same people all the time, yes? And then, of course, there's the inbreeding factor. Are they one side of the story? Yes.
There's like some disease that was native to Cayman.
Sorry?
Some health disease that was native to Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it has slurred speech and everything. This is a result of the
Of the inbreeding, that in actual fact you can actually find yourself, whether you know it or not, helping to to create health problems that result from inbreeding. Okay. I also think there's also the boredom factor, that we wish to avoid. Yes?
No, but inbreeding also be caused by boredom because you're boarding on that house. And then people to talk to, end up talking to your cousin and things might.
There's that. Okay. Can we? Is boredom in actual fact expressing through this central, it's one of the recurring themes, isn't it? The relationship between Cayman and the outside world. Now, of course, if we are all island people surrounded by water, yes? Does it mean that on basically on a geographical, physical level, we're locked in by the water as well, aren't we? And if we want a break, thank you. Yes, thank you, Josh. If we want a break in the monotony, and we can't hop on a plane all the time, does it mean then that we need the outside world to come to us? Now, the outside world comes to us in terms of foreign-made products, foreign ideas through television, etc. But in this day, there were no televisions this day that Mr. Budden was talking about. And, of course, foreign people. Now, of course, if you are a seafaring and a seagoing nation, are you with me? Does it also mean that the ocean brings to you new ideas and new people, and you go out to the ocean as well and to other places? Did Caymanians go to live in Jamaica a lot? Did Caymanians go to have babies in Jamaica a lot? Yes. Did Caymanians go to live in this island that's part of Cuba called the Isle of Pines a lot when their economy was good. Yes. Did Caymanians go on the ocean a lot? And were they the immigrants and the seafarers who discovered the rest of the world and what? Sent back or brought back money to their families, what the modern calls the allotments, but also did such people bring back different ideas. In other words, if you're locked in by the ocean, do you need outside influences in order to what? Expand your mental horizons and grow? Okay. But what's the downside of it? The fear that you will be overwhelmed numerically, or you will be overwhelmed, forget about the numbers, worse yet, you'll be overwhelmed psychologically. Yes? In other words, the numerical factor is important, but is the bigger fear the fear that if enough people are coming and ideas are coming from outside into your space, you will be overwhelmed psychologically. If it happens too quickly. And is the time factor, therefore, important in the past, say, 25 to 30 years of the Caymanian boom and globalization impacts? Yes or no? In other words, change is a part of life. And is the theme of change as well a big theme in this last story, just as it was in the essay that some of us are critiquing. But you put your finger on it. In other words, the time factor in change can be crucial. If change happens too fast, can it actually become traumatic? Yes or no? If it happens faster than we've had enough time to deal with and digest the changes. Yes or no? Okay. Do older generations of Caymanians, when you talk to them, always stress that? How fast the changes in Cayman happen? Why do they keep saying this?
Because for a long period in your life, it was steady and the same, and then all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
where, we were kind of, born into when it was growing quickly, so we're used to it.
People in your age group, for instance, were born during the change period. But people who were born even 15 years before you, certainly 20 years before you, certainly 30 years before you, parents and grandparents, can they, especially grandparents, will they keep telling you how different Cayman used to be? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. And can that change then become scary, become traumatic, become intimidating? Yes or no? Of course. No. Hello?
It's like I didn't grow up here, but I used to come here a lot. They always used to say, oh, well, you can go on the road anytime of the night and walk by yourself. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Like your windows open.
Yeah.
You leave the door open and come back. You can't do that no more.
When I first came here for a wedding, was it 20 years ago? I was so shocked. People left the cars open, they left the houses open. This was standard procedure. Yeah. Even 10 years ago when I came here in 99, I left the car open. I mean, I remember at least one time waking up, I was renting a townhouse then, and going downstairs and finding I'd left the door downstairs open. And I'd left the briefcase by the side of the Jeep. I never felt afraid. I never felt intimidated in any way, When I told my brother-in-law, he's in Kingston, that, sometimes I would be watering the garden at 2 o'clock in the morning, he said, what? Yeah, you understand what I mean. And does that kind of change then when it relates to values become very scary, very frightening? Because I remember when I told my sisters, that people don't lock up cars here, They don't lock houses unless they feel like it. They said, well, have robberies there? And I said, well, apparently not. And she said, well, what, are the Caymanian people all wealthy? I said, no, but I think it's kind of beneath their dignity. That in terms of their value system, robbing others is just a no-no. It's a values thing. Then I came to the conclusion, of course, an easy conclusion to come to, that only foreigners committed robberies here. But then you read the newspapers and you talk to the police and you realize that it would be a typical robbery or drug bust would include one Jamaican, one Caymanian, and one often from, yes, Spanish-speaking country, usually which one? Not Nicaragua, Honduras. But then, did we also recognize that the concept of easy money and was part of the problem? And does Bodden speak also in Cayman Islands in transition about the impact of money and greed on this changing society? In other words, that money combined with greed, fast money combined with greed, would be one of the catalysts of negative change in Cayman. In other words, when people realize that it's possible to make really fast money by actually doing nothing or almost nothing, yes? Does that change their whole worldview? Because remember, when we're dealing with values analysis, are we also dealing with worldviews, according to Lukács? Yes? Of course. And a worldview is a way of seeing life. Now, if you realize that you can make money by doing nothing or almost nothing, yes? Maybe just by signing your name on a piece of paper, you are the Caymanian silent partner in this business. Yes? So as a result, if the non-Caymanian is setting up a business and they need a partner, all you do is sign, but you actually don't have to do anything else. Does that change your outlook on your work ethic? It's what Billy Joel calls easy money. Yes? And if you take that one step further, do people then realize that you don't have to work hard the way your grandparents and parents did to make money? Does that change our whole outlook? Does that change our worldview? Yes or no? Yes, of course. Okay, so do we see then this conflict also, the conflicting relationship with and the conflicting response to the present versus the past? Yes or no? Of course. Now, I mean, those of us who read that story or saw the movie, The Great Gatsby, and if you can get it, you can get it from the video shops, you should watch it sometime. Are we caught in this interesting and often dynamic relationship between the past, the present, and the future? Yeah? Is that what Fitzgerald, the great American writer, tells us? Yes. And is it also true that the past is, the present is always becoming the future, and the future is always fast becoming the present, and the present is always fast becoming the past? But the past also influences our present behavior, and our present behavior influences the past. So is it a kind of endless cycle the past versus the present versus the future. But when the past has been changed too rapidly, is it then, do we find ourselves in a kind of traumatic relationship with the present? The things that we valued in the past have been changed too quickly. Yes? Does that destabilize our value system? You hear Caymanians all the time, not just preachers in church, not just politicians, talking about what? Why is it that Caymanian values have changed so fast? In other words, when I was your age, I couldn't possibly think of doing this. When I was talking about the short shorts, I know I was sounding like my mother or grandmother. Yes? In other words, X years ago, the idea of a young Caymanian woman walking out of her house in short shorts with and without a brassiere, this just couldn't be entertained. Am I right? Yes or no? Not getting personal here.
So, you mean out of school? But I mean, like, certain stuff you can't wear your brassiere.
Yeah. But even the no bra fashions, would they have been seen with a rather questionable, in a rather questionable light? Yes or no? I know that Jamaica I grew up in is 100 years back, and you couldn't possibly leave your house like that. No. Out of the question. But the point is that, do the fashions themselves speak about change? Changing lifestyle, changing values. Yes? When I get upset about the short shorts, you think, oh, grandma is talking now. But the truth is, well, are there other factors involved? We won't get into those. But my point is, are we looking at then, if we're looking at this problem, dealing with our relationship between the past and the present, yes? Are we also looking at changes in lifestyles, values, even things that express lifestyles and values like fashions? When Mr. Bodden comes, he'll also talk to us about the traditional Caymanian woman's style of presenting herself. Yes? Very conservative. Sorry?
Some of the stuff had to leave. I mean, like,
Some of it had to go?
yeah, I was walking around in wampers and
Yeah, I agree. But can we
I
up...
mean, like, times have gotten hard. I agree, like, some of the stuff is too short. But
Yes.
time has gotten harder than how it used to be. You can't be walking around.
You think it's hotter?
Yeah, definitely.
Global warming?
Yeah.
Okay. But, okay, what you're saying is that there's some fashions, for instance, that would be impractical.
Just for the weather and just for the occasion, you can't wear a long suit 24/7.
Exactly. Dress for the occasion. Exactly. Appropriateness. Yes.
But don't wear like see-through blues and stuff and like skirts without shorts underneath that, when the breeze lick it,
Oh, God.
In other words, appropriateness, but does Bodden also stress the concept of modesty? That, in other words, the traditional Caymanian woman stressed modesty and appropriateness in how she presented herself. And do we see that element then in, for instance, the portrait he gives us of Miss Pearlie, in how Pearlie lost her false teeth? In other words, is Pearlie the tradition? She's young, but is she representative of the beautiful traditional young Caymanian woman? She's beautiful but modest and humble. Yes? She is very much the center of a lot of envy, yes, among the women in the neighborhood. But does she maintain her integrity and her modesty and her self-control? Yes. So in other words, are we looking at a person who is not just pretty on the outside, but pretty on the inside, if you know what I mean. Yes. And is this very much, of course, not just your traditional Caymanian woman, but is it a version of womanhood that is admired in the Caribbean? Yes or no? Yes. That, in other words, that concept of a beauty that is not just physical. Yes, a prettiness that's not just on the outside. Is it something that is very much a concept of beauty and the subject of admiration in the Caribbean generally? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. And Pearlie, of course, worse yet, the American man who is an officer, yes, a respected officer in the American Army, or is it Navy, falls madly in love with Pearlie, yes? And, you know, he isn't just looking for a quick island affair. He makes a commitment right away. He wants to get married, yes? And the woman he was flirting with before cannot forgive this. Yes. Are we looking at the intra-gender? Are we looking, you're saying what? Are we okay, we spoke about intra-race prejudice. Prejudices within the same race against each other. Yes? Yes or no?
Yes.
Have we?
Yes.
In other words, say for instance, if there is a race, a color continuum, let's finish this, my friend. Are we looking at the darker skinned people over here, the lighter skinned people over here, are going within the Negro race, for instance, are going to stand out most, they're going to be the subjects of most prejudice, yes? And will these over here have stereotypes about those over here and these over here against them, and so on. The darker skinned people will have stereotypes about the lighter skinned people, and the lighter skinned people will have stereotypes of, you've heard this. Okay, I mean, this is nothing new. Okay.
Wouldn't you say that they're trying around victimology?
It's a form of victimology?
Yeah.
Of course. Of course. We said before, for instance, when I came first this term, I had this scar on my face. You wondered what had happened. Was I in a car accident or something? I didn't explain to you where it had come from, no? No. Okay, well, another time. Okay. So in other words then, we know that the stereotype, well, you're all very polite about it because it was more visible then, thank you. Can we? You have the intra within the race prejudice. Do you have the intra-gender sexism, the sexist prejudice within the same gender group? Put it this way, is there anything as painful as the kind of gender stereotyping and gender prejudices that comes from within your same gender? Is that what we see Pearlie being subjected to? Other women hating her, other women running her down, not for anything bad she has done, but just for who she is. Yes or no? Is it a kind of cruelty that people within the same gender can extend towards each other, just like the intra-race prejudice? You remember the man, the so-called beautiful man in Clinton's story? This picky-head gal who wants her? This big-foot gal who wants her? Yeah? You remember that one? Yeah. In other words, this kind of prejudice is, of course, a way by which the group itself, victimizes members of its own group. Yes? Now, do we see again the theme of beauty in how Pearlie lost her false teeth? Okay, so are we seeing some themes emerging? Change and our relationship with time, the past, the present, the future. Do we see also victimization and the power of money and the meaning of the land? We see all of those in this collection. In particular, do we see the analysis of beauty in terms of his depiction of Pearlie, in how Pearlie lost her false teeth, but also in the death of Miss Altamira Johnson? In other words, is this old lady also a symbol of a kind of spiritual beauty, which we as readers naturally admire? Yes or no? Of course. Okay. Then, of course, the change debate. Is it debate about change and the values involved in change and how we deal with it? Yes? How we let it impact on our values. Is that a debate very much at the heart of the dialogue of the old men? The last story. Yes. Then, of course, Cayman's relationship with the outside world. Yes? And how the outside world is allowed to impact on Cayman and Cayman's own self-identity. And, of course, the impact of money and the role of greed. In other words, when large sums of money can be obtained with very little work, does your work ethic come under fire? Yes or no? Of course. In other words, if you know that by selling this piece of land, you can make $1 million within 2 weeks, why would you hold on to it and keep sweating it out in this office where the air conditioning keeps breaking down? Or worse, yes, in this restaurant where the kitchen is hot and the customers are rude. If you get my point. In other words, the impact of fast money on the Caymanian work ethic. Okay, to be continued. Thank you very much. Please remind me to do the register when we meet again. So, our critiques. Now, if you want, hello, my friends. If you're having any further problems with your critique writing, let me know by Sunday evening. Send me what you have. Thank you very much. Are we up to date now, my friend? Because you can check. Sorry about that. I forgot. Thank you very much. Okay, now we turn off. How do we turn off, honey? Problems? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so thank you. Let me put, where should I put this so I don't lose it? I have it. If you will just hold on for me, please. You have to run away now. Over there? Spanish? Right now. Okay, I'll bring it over to you. I'm going to just sit down here with you. Okay. Josh, can we turn off? Okay, I hope that helps. Yeah, just send me your thesis paragraph.
I have the topic sentences for each paragraph too.
Good. That's the hard part too. Okay, thank you. Okay, Josh, you turn off.
Put your password in this.
Press this?
No, you need to put your password in.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's